So hello and welcome to the third lecture of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. We'll finish the first act of the play today, and we'll see that the first act, the fun and games, kind of introduces the key themes that the play takes up in the following two acts. So we're doing this in a detailed manner, but I would suggest that you go ahead and read the play line by line and the whole play, and please let us know in the forum if you have any questions that you would like to be extrapolated on. So here we are back again in the play, and we're saying that they're talking about physical prowess. So we see with this idea of emasculation of George, there's this idea of prowess, of physical prowess that is coming in, intellectual acumen and everything. So Nick says, oh yes, I was a quarterback, but I was much more adept at boxing really. So it's interesting that he would refer to boxing. So boxing is like a bout, a just. It's a sport which involves hurting the other person. So it's a game. It is a game which involves hurting other people, which is what's happening in this play. That they're playing fun and games, but these are games and fun. I mean, we do have audiences of boxing. We have people watching it and betting and going like supporting a people. But at the same time, we must remember it involves causing pain to another person. So the games and the fun and games that we see in the play are to a certain extent like that. They are fun, they are games, but we must remember that people are actually getting hurt, that the hurt is real, that you will see often in the stage direction before someone says something, there's a reference that saying it in a hurt manner, in an angry manner. So the emotions are real. You can feel the affective intensity on the stage real hard. And boxing, it's like two people and there would be a victor and there would be someone who's defeated. It's a sport also like that, where one kind of asserts their dominance over their opponent. It's about defeating an opponent as a sport. And Martha says, boxing. You hear that, George? See? So you can realize that Martha is suddenly, after when she hears boxing, she's trying to get George into a difficult position with that. And she continuously pairs Nick with George. And we've read that Nick is a quarterback. It's a reference to a rugby position where it takes a lot of physical capacity to play quarterback, and has a better build than George, and he's to box. So we can see certain aggressive nature in his quality coming up. And again, like I cannot go line by line as I mentioned for the lack of time, but like to mention these snippets that decency forbids. I mentioned, George says, Martha, decency forbids, saying something like you cannot go into certain, but we said that the play started with sort of a ridiculing of modesty, sort of ridiculing of propriety, of guests arriving at ungodly hours to places of hosts acting in very weird manners with guests. So there is no decency, there is no propriety, there is no modesty, there is no playing it by the rules. So even if it's boxing, we see it's probably all blows that are being hit below the belt, constantly going like that, which goes with the image of emasculation. So what is this secret that Martha plans to disclose? It is about a boxing match that one day Martha's father had arranged with George, but George was not inclined to fight him. So what Martha did was she put up a pair of gloves, and she says, and George wheeled around and punched George from behind. And what happened after that? Martha says, and George wheeled around real quick and he caught it right in the jaw. Row, Nick laughs. So you can see this is a public humiliation. I hadn't meant it, honestly. Anyway, row right in the jaw. And he was off balance. He must have been, and he stumbled back a few steps and then crash, he landed flat again in a huckleberry bush. Nick laughs. Honey goes and shakes her head. So it's see that Honey is still kind of empathizing with George, because we'll say Honey is also slightly built. She is also physically frail. She feels some kind of sympathy for George, but which Martha and Nick are not feeling at this point. Nick is laughing at this, and you can see this kind of like assertion of power, that these are the points you can see that Nick has been humiliated. So George has been humiliated in manner. And after that, we see that George retaliates with a blow from below by getting a fake gun and shooting it at Martha, which Honey gets like really scared and everything. So this is lot of reference to backstabbing in a sense, that backstabbing, the idea of backstabbing comes up, that people are disclosing the most personal secrets of their people. We'll see that Nick discloses a very personal secret with Honey to George, which George makes terrible use of in the play. So there's this references to backstabbing. There's a constant feeling of backstabbing in the play, that people are coming and hitting you from behind. These are not hurts that are coming from the front, but that are coming from the behind, that are like, walking up to you from behind and you don't even know. And this is also the kind of the threat of the nuclear war that we are talking about, that it's always in the back, it's always threatening to come out from behind you and getting you at the most unsuspecting hour, just coming down and falling on you. And you can see here that references to wanting attention. So Honey is constantly saying that I have been frightened by this, but nobody's paying attention. Then she says wanting attention. So you can see that there is a lot of stage direction that Albee gives, because the play is already so full with dubiousness, that it is already so open to interpretation, that certain places are locked down. But you see that even though these places are locked down, they do make possible the play that happens within the play of meanings, the play of characters. So we come to the point where it has been told that Nick is a professor of biology. First, it was thought that he was a professor of maths, but it turns out that he's a professor of biology. And George says that his work will be with chromosomes, and it would be about altering genes and altering chromosomes to build the perfect race of men. Now, I want you to pay direct attention to this project that George points out about building a better race of people. So, if you see, again I mentioned that the Second World War haunts this play, the presence of the World War. And you will see that this waiting for sons who did not return, in this play the son is not true, but we have seen that in All My Sons there is this mother that waits for his son Larry to come back home. So this war had made its presence felt like that, in the way of waiting for sons who never returned, right? And so the war, one of the Nazi policies during the war was this creation of an ideal race, of a supreme race, of the race of supreme people who would be all good, the Aryans would have no shortages, who would be the ideal humans. And somehow in Nick's activities, George locates this sort of project of this Nazi project, this project of creating the superhuman. So in a sense, the agenda of the Second World War, which was then condemned, which caused the Holocaust, which caused the killing of the Jews, is still not been forgotten. That this idea that humans can be bettered, that humans have a potential of bettering them, that there is this ideal form of humans, and it is very problematic, right? I mean, that who gets better, who decides who is not good enough, these things. Like, we are seeing these images of dehumanization where being a non-human is worse than human. But we can see that many recent studies on animal rights would exactly point at this point, that you cannot make those judgments. And I would like to refer to J.M. Coetzee's The Lives of Animals for a discussion where he also discusses the Holocaust in a very interesting way, and I would like you to take a look at that, to confuse this way of making, to privileging a human being, to privileging one kind of human life, one kind of human being over animals, objects, and other human beings even. So that is something that Nick is a form of that kind of Nazi tendency. And we see that George is also a professor of history here, and he continuously says in the play that have we learned nothing from history? Have we learned nothing from history? And this is what he actually means, that this kind of ideas, this kind of things kind of this is a pursuit of human fullness in a different manner, as opposed to music, as opposed to other things, that as opposed to poetry, which are other forms of human fullness, which do not depend on this creation of a perfect group of people. So, so that history that showed us that, okay, a second world war happened, this atomic bomb happened, so many people died, but we're not learning from history. So there's this mad progress of science that he's hinting at, that is not taking lessons from history. And this mad progress, this looking ahead that Nick symbolizes, but we again see that this is a dead land where this moving ahead is not so simple, is not so easy as it seems like. And he says, but George says, but everyone will tend to be rather the same, alike, everyone, and I'm sure I'm not wrong here, will tend to look like this young man here. So we see also this is against reproduction, we have cloning. So when does someone look exactly like someone? It is when a process of cloning happens. So there will not be reproduction, there will not be children born out of love or something like that, but there will only be cloning, there will only be one person. And we can also see that this biblical reference again, like we found reference to Gomorrah before, there is again a biblical reference that everyone will tend to look like this young man here. So in Bible we say man was created in the image of God, right? So here Nick, the people Nick will create will be created in his own image. So this is man playing God. This is man playing God that George kind of opposes here. And Nick, the people, and he says that I want, yes, they will be like me. There's this sort of terrible ego, terrible, and God is again a form of patriarchal authority, right? So it's no wonder that George, who has kind of abandoned his quest for authority, that can criticize this form of playing God, that you shouldn't be playing God. While Nick, who says that yes, I do plan to take over biology department, you'll see if when you read the plan, I do plan to take it one course by one course, I do plan to become this huge figure, this authoritative figure in here, is the one who believes in this kind of playing God, that you can play God in this world. Here you see, with this we'll have in time a race of glorious men. And he says, I suspect we'll not have much music, much painting, but we'll have a civilization of men, smooth, blonde, and right at the middleweight limit. So the middleweight is also a boxing term that is coming up, that this will be, we have a term, right, fighting fit, that this will be men who are fighting fit, who are ready for fights all the time. A race of scientists and mathematicians, each dedicated to working for the greater glory of the super civilization. So we have this idea of the superman, of the super civilization coming in. And Martha says goody, she's enjoying this. And Martha kind of likes her daddy, the big role that daddy plays, the big daddy role. And the daddy with the capital D here is kind of signifies what Laka calls the big other. It's the someone who is in control of the symbolic field. It's someone who determines what meanings take place and what meanings are aberrant. He is the one who sets the laws. He is the one who does everything. So daddy here is that kind of Lacanian figure. He's the big other. He kind of makes possible this symbolic framework against which these people are working. So he is the one who built the college. He is the one for the reason that these people are here. So he is the framework. He is the overlying framework, the big other, the big daddy, the one, right? So Martha is kind of comforted in him playing that kind of role, and she wished George would also play that kind of a role, but George being George, he couldn't do that. And George says, there will be a certain loss of liberty, I imagine, as a result of this experiment, but diversity will no longer be the goal. So you can see that diversity holds a certain importance in George's thought. Cultures and races will eventually vanish. The ants will take over the world. So you see there is this weird juxtaposition. We are saying that dehumanization as something less than human, as short of human, but then again we have this idea that what is superhuman, what is very human, what is greatly human is also not human. That it is our frailties, our shortcomings that somehow make us human. So if they become a race of very much human to human, then it will also be a race of ants that are taking over the world. So the human is always somewhere in the middle of things, of God, of great beings, of lesser beings. The human always somewhere occupies a space in the middle, but always threatening to move beyond the two. Can either go below or can go up and play God. Again, like, so it goes on like that, and there is a point where Honey says, well, all right, the sun, the reference to the sun comes back. When is your son? And she giggles again. So we can sense that she is drunk, and that is why she is saying, when is your son, but rather than where is your son. But this is a language game, a play on languages that are picked up again, if you look at it. So when is your son would also be a reference to, I already pointed out, right, that this is a play that is aware of it, that it is a play. Through references to acting within the play, it shows that the characters are aware that, that the play does not quite try to hide the fact from the audience that it is like, it's a work of fiction, it's totally a play, and the characters are not aware that they are in a play. So when she says, when is your son, it's almost like a cue. So it's like, when does your son make the entry in the play, rather than where is your son. And we see them picking up it like, where is your son and when. But if you think about in the context of a play, when is your son makes more sense, because when does your son make an entrance? When is the cue to make your son to make? Is it in Act 1, 2, 3? When does your son coming? Then we see that the syntax of the question is played upon when Honey says, where is your son coming home? And then again we realize, oh, then when is your son coming home is a better question. So you can see this language game, this convolution creates this idea of convolution in language, of corrupted is in language, that just when you say something is the right thing to say, you think, oh no, that is then a certain situation comes out when you realize that is not the right thing to say. You should have to say something else. Then George says, when is our son coming home? So that's the thing. It creates this sort of like improv, that when will be the cue to cue him in? When does he come in? It's like waiting for Godot, when does Godot come? When does he come in? But the time is spent waiting for that person, and these are waitings that against which the arrival is always deferred, like meaning, the arrival of meaning is constantly deferred in a way. And here we have see that Martha says that our son green, what eyes does the sun have? Green, is it green? But says in some lights they look brown, but they're green. Not green like his, more hazel. George has watery blue eyes, milky blue. So we again see like the blue eyes, blonde hair was associated with this kind of purity of race, while we see that a kind of mixing of colors in the eyes sort of hints to that kind of mixing. And we saw that Honey, when she enters, she says that no mixing, no trouble. But we see that mixing is a fundamental truth of life. It's something that we cannot choose to ignore, even if we go ahead and do that. And here again the father is called a white mouse. He's a white mouse. Again a dehumanizing, a deflating thing right on the snout. So with this idea of having children is also this idea of passing on what you have. One of the reasons to have a child is to pass on what you have to the child. It's like lineage, it's transfer of property and everything. And Martha says that George was first chosen so that he could be an heir apparent, and so with the heir apparent, in the sense, with the idea of heir apparent, the idea of kind of who follows the king, who gets to go into the throne of the king, that comes up. And it problematizes the idea of having children, because you're not just having a child, you're not just having a progeny, but you're also having an heir who's entrusted with certain responsibility, an heir who must take certain responsibility, on whom you can pass on your things and before you pass on with your life. So, and we see that there would be problems with the heir apparent with kings, and he has been, the daddy, Martha's daddy, has been referred to as a sort of kingly figure when we got the reference to his staff, like him holding on to his staff as a kingly figure. So he is also looking for like some kind of prince to give it to. But we again, like for old kings, finding an heir apparent would have been a problematic thing when, when the king could not have a child. And here also we see that the heir apparent who was chosen, the special person, he does not have a child. So not having a child, not being able to give what you possess onto someone else, to your child, it becomes a problem in the play. One of the key reasons of like looking forward to having a child. And as I said, that his emasculation, George's emasculation, has been constantly hinted at, and here again he's called a flop, a great big fat flop. So, and when he hears the word flop, George breaks a bottle against the portable bar and stands there, still with his back to them all, holding the remains of the bottle by the neck. So he's angry. There are physical manifestations of his anger that are coming up, and he's almost breaking down. So these are not, that we say that this illusion and reality, what is illusion, what is reality, these are being problematized, that you do not know that are they playing a game, or when is the game getting too close to the heart, when is something too real that it's hurting somebody else. Again she continues, and after conducting what course to take, he has broken a bottle. And Martha is not interested in the fact that George might be angry that he has broken a bottle, but she is interested in angering him more. So she says that, I hope that was an empty bottle, George. You don't want to waste good liquor, not on your salary, not on an associate professor's salary. So he's still an associate professor, that he has not made it to that place. And it's like that, you're getting angry, but it would be rather like more hurt. It's like adding salt to the wound. So with that, I'd like to end Act 1, and after this Act 2 begins, which is called a German term, but we will not go there. It's called Walpurgisnacht, but in this lecture we'll not go there. We end with Act 1, and so we have covered the major themes that we have in the first act of the play, and I would really encourage you to go through the whole play. And for a lack of time mostly, we could not elaborate on all concepts, or elaborate on or read through all the lines that kind of go with the concept. But if you'd like to explore some concepts more on these lines, or if you'd like to know some more, I suggest you put a question on the forum, and as the TAs will get to this question and sort out our queries as soon as possible. So thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the lectures. See you next time.